allow me to take you back a decade ago, when the world was just beginning to embrace the era of dating apps and the thrill of meeting strangers online. As a young man in my 30s, I found myself entangled in the web of Tinder, driven by a desire for companionship. Truth be told, a bit of adventure. Little did I know the Pandora's box I was about to open, the unforeseen consequences of swiping right. Amongst the multitude of profiles, I stumbled upon a charming girl whose playful banter captured my attention. Flirting and exchanging messages ensued over the course of a couple of days, building an undeniable chemistry. The allure of a potential tryst grew with each passing interaction, until the day before our scheduled rendezvous when she unexpectedly reached out. Fueled by liquid courage and an unabashed desire, late at night, under the intoxicating influence of her suggestive text, she extended an invitation to her residence. In my lustful haze, I found myself blindly accepting, neglecting any concerns that should have arisen from her choice of dwelling. She provided me with an address nestled within a dubious neighborhood, an unfamiliar territory that ignited a flicker of caution within me. Nevertheless, I dismissed my apprehensions, brushing them off as remnants of previous encounters in shady locales. Approaching the given address, a disconcerting sight greeted my eyes. The neighborhood appeared half-formed, as if abandoned mid-construction, while the house itself bore the scars of incomplete renovation. An eerie glow emanated from the basement, casting long shadows that danced ominously across the property. My unease grew, but she swiftly assured me not to fret, uttering an unsettling remark regarding the peculiar light source. Though my instincts screamed for retreat, my primal desires overshadowed all rationale. I exited my vehicle, embarking on a path that promised carnal pleasures yet dripped with a foreboding ambience. But as fate would have it, the universe conspired to save me from the impending darkness. Just as I turned away from the house, an otherworldly sense of dread enveloped me, clutching at the very core of my being. It was in that moment, when adrenaline coursed through my veins, that I heard the distinct sound of hurried footsteps approaching from behind. Multiple pairs of feet echoed ominously in the night, their rhythm an unsettling symphony of imminent danger. Fear gripped me, my manhood shrinking within as I sprinted towards my vehicle. Panic took hold as I fumbled to unlock the car, the figures drawing closer with each passing second. Masks veiled their identities, adding a grotesque and macabre dimension to their sinister intentions. One of them, wielding a bat, ruthlessly struck my windshield, the impact shattering the glass and leaving an indelible mark of terror. Desperation fueled my actions as I dropped the keys, a momentary loss of composure in the face of sheer terror. With trembling hands, I retrieved the key, fervently inserting it into the ignition. The engine roared to life, and without hesitation, I slammed my foot on the gas pedal. The vehicle lurched forward, narrowly avoiding a collision with a nearby street pole. In the chaos, one of my assailants met the force of my rearview mirror, crashing to the ground in a heap. As I raced away, my heart pounded in my chest, the gravity of the situation sinking in. I found solace within the confines of my home. But the subsequent 24 hours were consumed by a relentless replaying of the harrowing events that transpired. The weight of my silence pressed upon me, and I chose to conceal the truth, weaving a tale of a chance encounter with a deer, a feeble attempt to explain the fractured. The shame of my gullibility, coupled with the desperate need to shield myself from judgment, led me to concoct a fabricated story to preserve my dignity. In the aftermath of that night, I couldn't shake the lingering questions. Who were those masked figures, and what malevolent intentions did they harbor? Was it a premeditated trap or a cruel twist of fate? I scoured the local news, hoping to find any shred of information that could shed light on the incident. But my efforts were in vain. Haunted by the specter of that terrifying encounter, I became obsessed with unraveling the truth. I delved into online forums, recounting tales of similar encounters, searching for any semblance of closure. The more I dug, the more I uncovered a hidden world of dark secrets and dangerous liaisons, where the thin veil of online anonymity offered a breeding ground for malevolence. Fear mingled with a renewed sense of caution as I navigated the treacherous landscape of online dating. The allure of casual encounters gave way to an understanding of the inherent risks, and I vowed to be more discerning in my pursuits. The scars left by that night would forever serve as a reminder of the darkness that lurks beneath the enticing facade of virtual connections. As time passed, the incident gradually faded into the recesses of my memory, yet its lessons remained etched upon my soul. I emerged from the experience with a newfound wisdom, a cautionary tale to share with others who might tread the perilous path of online romance. It became my mission to caution the unsuspecting, to raise awareness of the hidden dangers that lie in wait, disguised as enticing opportunities. I was driving home from work and had a sudden craving for pizza. I pulled into a local pizza shop that I had never been to before. It was a busy Saturday night, and the place was staffed by 3 young girls. They looked like teenagers, and I could tell that working in a pizza shop in Australia was a get-paid cash after school kind of job. As I was placing my order, the girl taking it seemed distracted. She was looking past me at something. I couldn't figure out what it was until she yelled out to the other 2 girls prepping and cooking the pizzas, "Oh, thank God, Matt is back." Just then, a delivery boy walked into the store, but he quickly turned around and left, taking more pizzas with him. I paid and turned to sit and wait. That's when I saw what the girl had been looking at behind me. A man was standing next to the entry door peering through the shop face window. He was about 58, in his late 22nd or early 30s, rat-like, pudgy, unnaturally pale with dark spots under his eyelids, long and greasy dark hair, and sharp-looking, almost cylindrical teeth. Weirdly, I thought, maybe that's her mate. Obviously, I got bad vibes, but my initial reaction was just confusion at the sight of him. Another guy came in to pick up some pizzas, and the girl froze while serving him too. She apologized and said something like, "Sorry, I'm a bit distracted because this guy won't stop coming to my work and staring at me through the window. My boss banned him, but he comes back when he's gone." I took a proper look at the window guy now, and he was pointing at her, waving, and making other weird gestures. This instantly made me very uncomfortable, so without really thinking, I went outside and confronted the guy about what he was doing. I had a fair bit of adrenaline and don't really remember what I said, but it was like, "You have to leave. You're scaring the workers." He just stared at me and did this like weird wheeze in exasperation, like a dismissive wheeze. Then through a wheezy voice, he said, "I'm not doing anything." I said, "You're being a creep and you're banned. Get out of here." Then went back in. The creep walked off, and I thought it was solved. The girl thanked me and asked what he said. I said he didn't really say anything, and she explained the things she had to the other guy before, and also said he had said some really inappropriate and gross things to her. Just as I'm sitting back down, the guy comes in with a bank card in his hand. I said, "What did I just tell you? Get out of here." But he makes a beeline straight to the counter and orders a pizza. The girl froze up, and I could tell she put through his order because she was scared of how he would react if she did. Then he came and sat right next to me and said, "See, if she didn't want me here, she wouldn't have let me get a pizza." It gets a bit hazy for me here because this is where the trauma happened, but I'm pretty sure I told him he was disgusting, and then he got really angry. He stood up, bent. As I walked back to my car, I couldn't shake off the feeling of unease that lingered within me. The encounter with the creepy man left me feeling violated and vulnerable. I couldn't understand why the man targeted the teenage girl working at the pizza shop, and what he hoped to achieve by his disturbing behavior. Days passed, and I tried to push the incident to the back of my mind, but I found myself constantly checking my surroundings, especially when walking alone or in secluded areas. I felt a sense of dread each time I heard footsteps behind me or saw a suspicious-looking person approaching me. One night, as I was driving home from work, I noticed a car following me. At first, I tried to convince myself that it was just a coincidence, but the car stayed behind me for several blocks, and I realized that it was no mere coincidence. My heart raced as I tried to think of what to do. I remembered the creepy man from the pizza shop and wondered if this could be him. I decided to take a detour and take a few turns to see if the car would continue to follow me. As I turned a corner, the car suddenly accelerated and rammed into the side of my car. My car spun out of control and crashed into a tree. I was thrown forward and hit my head on the steering wheel. When I regained consciousness, I found myself lying on the ground next to my car, and the driver of the other car was standing over me. It was the creepy man from the pizza shop, and he was smiling down at me with his sharp, cylindrical teeth. "Look what you made me do," he said as he bent down and grabbed me by the hair. "You shouldn't have interfered with my plans." I screamed for help, but there was no one around to hear me. The man dragged me to his car and threw me in the back seat. I tried to fight back, but he was too strong, and he overpowered me easily. He drove me to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town, and I realized that I was in serious trouble. The man had a sick and twisted mind, and I knew that he wouldn't stop until he had satisfied his desires. For days, I was trapped in that warehouse, living in fear and terror. The man tortured me in unspeakable ways, and I lost all hope of ever escaping. I was convinced that I would die there, alone and forgotten. One day, the man left the warehouse and didn't come back. I was left alone, chained up and starving. I knew that I had to find a way to escape, or I would die there. I struggled and fought with all my might, and eventually, I managed to break free from the chains. I stumbled out of the warehouse, weak and disoriented. I didn't know where I was, but I knew that I had to find help. I walked for hours until I finally reached a road and flagged down a passing car. The driver took me to the hospital, and I was treated for my injuries. The police were called, and they launched an investigation into the incident. They eventually found the man and arrested him for kidnapping and assault. In the end, justice was served, but the trauma of that night stayed with me for years to come. I never forgot the terror of being trapped in that warehouse at the mercy of a sick and twisted man. And every time I drove past that pizza shop, I couldn't help but wonder if there were other innocent victims out there, just like me. Gather round, my dear listeners, and prepare yourselves for a tale of terror that will chill you to the bone. It was the beginning of summer last year when I embarked on a trip with my mother to my Nana's farm in rural South Carolina. The journey was long and winding, the roads badly maintained and barely wide enough for two cars to pass one another. We were surrounded by a dense forest, where the houses were few and far between, set back into the tree line from the road, shrouded in darkness. As we drove deeper into the woods, the radio down almost to silent. It was around 11 p.m. and we were approximately 15 minutes away from our destination. That's when it happened. We came onto a straight stretch of road, surrounded by dense trees on both sides. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a blur of a creature darted across the road, right at the edge of our headlights. It was moving pretty fast, but we were able to get a good look at it, and what we saw will haunt me for the rest of my days. It was a creature, large and emaciated, with a segmented body that appeared to be made up of protruding ribcage. We couldn't see its head, but it was clear that it was not a normal animal. The creature was using its front limbs to pull itself along in a loping motion, and it was moving considerably fast. As we both exclaimed, "What the hell is that?" the creature stood up and ran, not like a dog rearing on its hind legs, but bipedally. I swear on my life, my dear listeners, that what we saw was real. We were both terrified, my mother and I, and we knew that we had witnessed something that defied explanation. I turned to my mother, my heart racing, and she was visibly shaken. We both agreed not to tell Nana about what we had seen to avoid scaring her. But as we pulled into the farm, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The darkness that surrounded us felt suffocating, and I couldn't help but wonder if that creature was still out there, lurking in the shadows. The rest of the weekend passed without incident, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was not right. When we left Nana's farm to head back home, I couldn't help but glance out the car window, looking for any sign of the creature we had seen. But there was nothing, just the dense forest, the badly maintained road, and the ever-present feeling of dread that had settled in my chest. Years have passed since that fateful night, but I still can't help but wonder what we saw. Was it a creature of the night, lurking in the darkness, or was it something else entirely, a being from another world that had stumbled upon our own? Whatever it was, I know one thing for sure. I will never forget the terror that consumed me that night, deep in the woods of rural South Carolina. I'm not sure if you'll believe me, but I have a story to tell you. It's about something strange that happened to me when I was a truck driver. It's something that's been haunting me for years, and I need to get it off my chest. I remember that day vividly. I had been driving for hours and decided to stop at a busy truck stop. It was one of those places that always had people coming and going. I went inside the building and ended up striking up a conversation with a woman who was also a truck driver. We talked about our jobs and where we were from. She seemed really nice, and we ended up eating together. I gave her my address, and she said she wanted to send me a postcard from the next city she was driving to. I didn't think anything of it at the time. When I got home a few days later, I started texting her. We were getting along well, and I was happy to have made a friend on the road. But then, one night, there was a knock on my door at midnight. I looked out the window and saw a man I didn't recognize. I decided not to answer the door, but he kept knocking. He eventually made his way to the back of my house and started pounding on the door and windows. I was terrified. I called the police, and they came and searched my house. They found a large rock that had been thrown through one of my windows. The man was gone, but the woman I had been texting with never texted me again. I can't explain it, but something about the whole thing felt off. It was as if she had set me up, as if she knew what was going to happen. I tried calling her, but the call wouldn't go through. It was as if she had disappeared. Years went by, and I thought I had moved on from the experience. But then, one day, I was driving through the city where she said she was from. I decided to stop at a diner to grab some food, and that's when I saw her. She was sitting in a booth, staring right at me. I couldn't believe it. I walked over to her, and she acted like she didn't know me, but I knew it was her. I could feel it. I left the diner feeling shaken. I couldn't explain what had just happened. It was as if she was playing some sort of game with me, and I was the pawn. I never saw her again after that, but the memory of her has stayed with me all these years. It's as if she was a ghost haunting me, reminding me of the danger that's out there on the road. I may have left the trucking life behind, but I'll never forget what happened to me that night. In the depths of my memory lies a chilling encounter from my teenage years, a haunting incident that still sends shivers down my spine. Growing up in the seemingly safe haven of Arizona, my friends and I would often embark on walks around the neighborhood, seeking respite from the confines of our homes. Little did we know that an unsuspecting stroll would plunge us into the clutches of terror. It was a typical evening, the sun slowly surrendering to the horizon as my two companions and I embarked on our familiar route back to our friend's house. The streets were adorned with the warm glow of streetlights, and a sense of tranquility hung in the air. Arizona had always been known for its friendly residents, and encounters on these walks were usually greeted with cheerful hellos or friendly waves. However, on this particular evening, an innocuous gesture would unleash a malevolence we never could have anticipated. As we passed by a corner house, its kitchen light cast an inviting glow, revealing a middle-aged man diligently washing his dishes. In that moment of eye contact, my instinctive response was to smile, while one of my friends playfully raised her hand in a friendly wave. Little did we know that these simple gestures would unleash a storm of horror upon us. With an eerie abruptness, the man abandoned his chores, leaving the dishes to clatter in the sink. In what felt like a heartbeat, he emerged from his house, a sinister figure looming on the corner, his fists clenched in a menacing display. Our joyous stroll transformed into a nightmare in an instant. Fear gripped our hearts, and our survival instincts kicked into overdrive, each of us responding in our own unique ways. One friend sprinted away in the opposite direction, propelled by sheer panic. Another succumbed to the overwhelming terror and unfortunate loss of bodily control amidst the chaos. And I, frozen in a paralyzing fear, stood rooted to the spot, a deer caught in the headlights of impending danger. With unbridled fury, the man charged toward us, his steps pounding the pavement like a relentless drumbeat. Finally, my senses reawakened, spurred by a surge of adrenaline coursing through my veins. My friend's firm grip on my arm snapped me out of my immobilized state, and we fled as if our lives depended on it. I trailed behind, my legs propelled by a desperate will to survive. Despite the man's formidable physique and unwavering determination, he closed the gap between us with alarming speed. The thunderous sound of his footsteps echoed in my ears, growing ominously closer in a desperate bid to capture me. He lunged forward, his outstretched hand aimed at my hair, but in that crucial moment, my adrenaline-fueled agility proved victorious, and I slipped from his grasp. We ran and ran, a wild race against an unrelenting pursuer, until finally the pursuit ceased. Panting and trembling, we sought refuge, reaching out to my friend's mother, our savior in that moment of terror. With trembling voices, we recounted the horrors we had experienced, revealing the location of the house that had birthed our nightmares. It was a house occupied by a registered sex offender. The revelation of that sinister truth sent shockwaves through our fragile teenage consciousness. While the subsequent events and my friend's relocation might not have been explicitly linked to that fateful encounter, our mothers, guided by an unwavering concern for our safety, established a strict decree. From that day forth, we were forbidden from wandering alone through any neighborhood, and our excursions required the protective presence of a vigilant parent. Years passed, and the memories of that traumatic night faded into the recesses of my mind, only to resurface recently as I engaged in a conversation with my friend. The topic of that harrowing night came up, reigniting a dormant flame of curiosity within me. I couldn't help but ponder the what-ifs and reflect upon the gravity of the situation. What if that man had managed to seize hold of my hair, subjecting me to an unknown fate? The thought sent a shiver down my spine, a stark reminder of how fragile our lives can be. It served as a haunting lesson, etching a profound mark on my consciousness. Today, at the age of 27, I carry with me a constant reminder of that chilling encounter. A pocket knife and pepper spray, symbols of empowerment and preparedness. While time may have dulled the edges of that memory, the scars of that night continue to shape my perspective on personal safety. In a world where online connections and casual encounters have become the norm, I am reminded of the Pandora's box that can be unleashed by unsuspecting interactions. The story of that night serves as a warning, urging caution and vigilance in a world where darkness can lurk behind a smile or a wave. As I navigate through life, I remain ever grateful for my narrow escape and the lessons learned. The incident may have robbed me of my innocence, but it gifted me with the awareness of the shadows that dance in the periphery of our lives. So, I continue to walk the streets with a newfound sense of caution, mindful of the hidden dangers that may lie in wait. For beneath the veneer of everyday life, a sinister underbelly exists, a reminder that evil can reside just around the corner. And though time may have passed, the memory of that night remains imprinted upon my soul, a testament to the fragility of youth, the resilience of the human spirit, and the importance of never underestimating the darkness that dwells within our world. In the end, it is the strength forged through adversity that allows us to emerge from the shadows, carry on, and hold our heads high, never forgetting the chilling truth that dwells just beneath the surface of our seemingly ordinary lives. In the depths of my memory lies a chilling encounter from my teenage years, a haunting incident that still sends shivers down my spine. Growing up in the seemingly safe haven of Arizona, my friends and I would often embark on walks around the neighborhood, seeking respite from the confines of our homes. Little did we know that an unsuspecting stroll would plunge us into the clutches of terror. It was a typical evening, the sun slowly surrendering to the horizon as my two companions and I embarked on our familiar route back to our friend's house. The streets were adorned with the warm glow of streetlights, and a sense of tranquility hung in the air. Arizona had always been known for its friendly residents, and encounters on these walks were usually greeted with cheerful hellos or friendly waves. However, on this particular evening, an innocuous gesture would unleash a malevolence we never could have anticipated. As we passed by a corner house, its kitchen light cast an inviting glow, revealing a middle-aged man diligently washing his dishes. In that moment of eye contact, my instinctive response was to smile, while one of my friends playfully raised her hand in a friendly wave. Little did we know that these simple gestures would unleash a storm of horror upon us. With an eerie abruptness, the man abandoned his chores, leaving the dishes to clatter in the sink. In what felt like a heartbeat, he emerged from his house, a sinister figure looming on the corner, his fists clenched in a menacing display. Our joyous stroll transformed into a nightmare in an instant. Fear gripped our hearts, and our survival instincts kicked into overdrive, each of us responding in our own unique ways. One friend sprinted away in the opposite direction, propelled by sheer panic. Another succumbed to the overwhelming terror and unfortunate loss of bodily control amidst the chaos. And I, frozen in a paralyzing fear, stood rooted to the spot, a deer caught in the headlights of impending danger. With unbridled fury, the man charged toward us, his steps pounding the pavement like a relentless drumbeat. Finally, my senses reawakened, spurred by a surge of adrenaline coursing through my veins. My friend's firm grip on my arm snapped me out of my immobilized state, and we fled as if our lives depended on it. I trailed behind, my legs propelled by a desperate will to survive. Despite the man's formidable physique and unwavering determination, he closed the gap between us with alarming speed. The thunderous sound of his footsteps echoed in my ears, growing ominously closer. In a desperate bid to capture me, he lunged forward, his outstretched hand aimed at my hair. But in that crucial moment, my adrenaline-fueled agility proved victorious, and I slipped from his grasp. We ran and ran, a wild race against an unrelenting pursuer, until finally the pursuit ceased. Panting and trembling, we sought refuge, reaching out to my friend's mother, our savior in that moment of terror. With trembling voices, we recounted the horrors we had experienced, revealing the location of the house that had birthed our nightmares. It was a house occupied by a registered sex offender. The revelation of that sinister truth sent shockwaves through our fragile teenage consciousness. While the subsequent events and my friend's relocation might not have been explicitly linked to that fateful encounter, our mothers, guided by an unwavering concern for our safety, established a strict decree. From that day forth, we were forbidden from wandering alone through any neighborhood, and our excursions required the protective presence of a vigilant parent. Years passed, and the memories of that traumatic night faded into the recesses of my mind, only to resurface recently as I engaged in a conversation with my friend. The topic of that harrowing night came up, reigniting a dormant flame of curiosity within me. I couldn't help but ponder the what-ifs and reflect upon the gravity of the situation. What if that man had managed to seize hold of my hair, subjecting me to an unknown fate? The thought sent a shiver down my spine, a stark reminder of how fragile our lives can be. It served as a haunting lesson, etching a profound mark on my consciousness. Today, at the age of 27, I carry with me a constant reminder of that chilling encounter. A pocket knife and pepper spray, symbols of empowerment and preparedness. While time may have dulled the edges of that memory, the scars of that night continue to shape my perspective on personal safety. In a world where online connections and casual encounters have become the norm, I am reminded of the Pandora's box that can be unleashed by unsuspecting interactions. The story of that night serves as a warning, urging caution and vigilance in a world where darkness can lurk behind a smile or a wave. As I navigate through life, I remain ever grateful for my narrow escape and the lessons learned. The incident may have robbed me of my innocence, but it gifted me with the awareness of the shadows that dance in the periphery of our lives. So, I continue to walk the streets with a newfound sense of caution, mindful of the hidden dangers that may lie in wait. For beneath the veneer of everyday life, a sinister underbelly exists, a reminder that evil can reside just around the corner. And though time may have passed, the memory of that night remains imprinted upon my soul, a testament to the fragility of youth, the resilience of the human spirit, and the importance of never underestimating the darkness that dwells within our world. In the end, it is the strength forged through adversity that allows us to emerge from the shadows, carry on, and hold our heads high, never forgetting the chilling truth that dwells just beneath the surface of our seemingly ordinary lives. It was a dark, starless night when I found myself driving on a long, empty road. I was a trucker, and I had been on the road for hours, driving through the night. I was exhausted, and my eyes were heavy with sleep. But I had to keep driving. I had a delivery to make, and I couldn't afford to stop. But then I saw a sign for a rest stop, and I knew I had to take it. I pulled off the road and parked my truck. I didn't bother looking for a truck stop or a motel. I just wanted to sleep. The rest stop was empty, and I was the only one there. The darkness was thick around me, and I could barely see the trees on either side of the road. I climbed into the back of my truck, and I closed my eyes. I was out within seconds, but my sleep was short-lived. I woke up to the sound of knocking. It was coming from the driver's side door. I was startled, and I wondered who could be knocking at this time of night. I got out of bed and went over to the door. When I looked out the window, I saw a man standing there. He was wearing a hood, and I couldn't see his face. He was looking up, and then he saw me. He moved away quickly, and I thought it was odd. I opened the door to see where he went, but he was gone. I got back into my truck, but I couldn't sleep. I felt like someone was watching me. I kept looking out the window, but I couldn't see anything. I tried to convince myself that it was just my imagination, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I closed my eyes again, hoping to get some sleep, but I was woken up again. This time, I didn't hear any knocking, but I knew something was wrong. I sat up and listened carefully, and then I heard it. Someone was trying to open the passenger side door of my truck. I jumped out of bed and went over to the door, but there was no one there. I opened the door and looked around, but there was nothing. I was getting scared now. I knew I had to get out of there, but I didn't want to leave my truck behind. I started to get ready to leave, but before I could, I heard another banging on the passenger side door. It was so loud that I thought it would break the door down. I walked over to the door, but before I could get there, the knocking stopped. I looked out the window, but I didn't see anything. And then I saw him, the man in the hood. He was running off into the woods. I watched him go, feeling a sense of dread wash over me. I started my truck and drove away as fast as I could. I didn't stop until I reached the nearest truck stop. I didn't know who that man was or what he wanted from me, but I knew one thing for sure. I would never forget that night, and I would never sleep in my truck again. I remember when my family moved to the countryside from the city when I was in my early teens. My dad always wanted to be a farmer, and we were fortunate enough to be financially stable for him to pursue his dream. We moved into a nice brick house on a ranch with a very large basement. It was half finished, with cinder block walls and no carpeting or sheetrock, but it was our official playroom. It wasn't long after we moved in that my sister began to act strange. She would talk to herself when she was alone in the basement and told us about her new friend, Gus, an older man who liked to visit her in the basement. At first, my parents were concerned, thinking someone had broken into the house, but they soon realized that Gus was just a figment of my sister's imagination. She would talk about him all the time, and I would hear her talking to him when I went down to check if anyone was really there. Gus always seemed to conveniently leave before I arrived. My brother was sick of hearing about Gus all the time and would get angry with my sister and tell her to shut up. He had this annoying habit of sneaking into my parents' room and watching my dad's porno tapes whenever our parents weren't home. One day, my sister came upstairs and yelled at him to stop watching bad movies because Gus had told her about it. My brother got angry and told her that there was no such person as Gus and that she was being foolish. My sister started crying, and I came to her defense, telling my brother that her talking about Gus didn't hurt anyone. He got even angrier and grabbed me by the arm, dragging me down to the basement and locking me in there, telling me to say hi to Gus. I wasn't scared to be in the basement by myself since I spent a lot of time down there. But being forced to go down there was a different story. I tried to escape through the outside door and the stairwell, but the door was locked from the inside. As I turned around to go back to the inside door, I saw a grown man standing in the window of the door in the stairwell, staring at me. He waved his finger at me before disappearing. I ran up the stairs to the inside door and pounded on it, yelling for my brother to open the door. I was scared shitless and told my family about the man I saw. They thought I was making it up, but my sister confirmed that it was Gus. She said that he was mad at my brother for watching bad movies and that he wanted to hurt him. Things started getting worse after that. My brother would wake up in the middle of the night, screaming about someone being in his room. My sister would see Gus in the basement, and I would hear strange noises in the middle of the night. It felt like something was watching us all the time. One day, my brother disappeared. We searched the entire house and property, but he was nowhere to be found. The police were called, but they couldn't find any evidence of foul play. My sister kept talking about Gus, saying that he had something to do with it. After that, things got even worse. We would hear strange whispers and footsteps in the middle of the night. My sister's behavior became even more erratic, and my parents started to worry about her mental health. They took her to see a therapist, but she refused to talk about anything. One day, my parents decided that we should move back to the city. We packed everything up and left the house behind. As we drove away, I looked back at the house, and I swear I saw a figure in the window waving at us. We never spoke of Gus. It was a mid-90s weekend, and the girl's parents were out of town. Her brother, who was supposed to be watching her, had abandoned her for a night out with his friends. And so, the girl was left to her own devices, watching the usual loop of cops, America's Most Wanted, and unsolved mysteries. All was well, until it wasn't. As she sat in the basement, watching TV, she heard the backyard gate open. Confused, she wondered why her brother would come in through the back instead of the front door. Then she saw them, the biggest feet she had ever seen, wearing maybe Timberland boots. The massive boots walked around the side of the house, and the girl couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Moments later, she heard the back door banging. Someone was trying to come in. She turned off the TV and sat still, her heart pounding in her chest. She heard loud stomping as a giant of a man walked down the back steps to the basement door. The girl's heart was in her throat. She heard banging and the sound of a turning knob. But thankfully, the doors were locked. It was silent for a couple of minutes, but the girl thought she was going to have a heart attack. Being only 13, the only thing she could think to do was put the blanket over her face and be still. Moments later, she heard the steps walk around the side of the house. Stopping at the window, what was 30 seconds felt like 5 years. The girl felt piercing eyes staring at her, but she was petrified and under a blanket. Moments later, she heard the gate open and shut, and then it was silent once more. The girl couldn't bring herself to think about what would have happened if those doors weren't locked. And to make matters worse, her brother had left her alone. As I tell you this story, I can feel the girl's fear and terror as if it were my own. The sound of the banging on the door, the sight of those massive boots, the feeling of being watched by a stranger. It's enough to make one's blood run cold. So, my friends, beware of the dangers that lurk in the night. Always be prepared and stay safe, for you never know when the next horror story may come to life.